Hello everyone. Welcome to Realist Quill. Like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching now? Naomi Peters, specialized in documenting abandoned places, ghost towns, shuttered hospitals, defunct amusement parks, for her popular YouTube channel Forgotten Spaces. With nearly 1 million subscribers, she had built her reputation on visiting locations others avoided, often alone, capturing both their eerie beauty and their historical significance. In June 2019, Naomi received an email from a viewer about an unmarked road in rural Kentucky that supposedly led to an abandoned coal mining community called Hendricks. According to local legend, the entire town had been evacuated in 1952 after a mine collapse released toxic gases, killing 37 miners and causing inexplicable behavior in surviving residents. The viewer included GPS coordinates and warned that the road didn't appear on modern maps. They also mentioned something that immediately captured Naomi's interest. Apparently, electronic devices malfunctioned near the town, and anyone who stayed after sunset reported hearing the sounds of miners working, despite the mines being sealed for over 60 years. Perfect content for her channel. Naomi packed her camera equipment and drove from her home in Columbus, Ohio, to eastern Kentucky, arriving near the coordinates around 2 p.m. Sure enough, she found an unmarked, overgrown dirt road branching off from Route 25E. Just as her viewer had described, the road was barely passable in her Honda CR-V, deeply rutted and reclaimed by nature. Old-growth trees formed a canopy overhead, filtering the sunlight into strange, shifting patterns on her windshield. After about 3 miles of careful navigation, Naomi's GPS signal disappeared, and her phone switched to airplane mode without her input. Just as the email said, she narrated to her camera mounted on the dashboard. Electronic interference makes sense near old mining operations. Could be mineral deposits, or even lingering pockets of methane affecting signal transmission. The road widened slightly as she emerged into what had clearly once been the town center. Dilapidated wooden structures lined what had been the main street, a general store with faded Coca-Cola signage, a post office with windows boarded from within, rows of identical company houses in various states of collapse. Naomi spent the afternoon filming, careful to document everything before the light faded. The town was remarkably intact for being abandoned for nearly 70 years. Almost as if the residents had expected to return. Inside the homes, she found dining tables still set with rusted cutlery, wardrobes full of moth-bitten clothing, children's toys scattered as if dropped during play. Most unsettling were the photographs. Every home contained family portraits, all displayed prominently, and in all of them the subjects' faces had been meticulously scratched out. Probably vandals, Naomi told herself as she finished filming the interior of what appeared to have been the town doctor's residence. She checked her watch, 5:47 p.m. Sunset would be around 8:30, giving her plenty of time to reach her car and navigate the treacherous road back to the highway. As she walked back toward the main street, Naomi realized something odd. There was no graffiti anywhere in Hendricks. Abandoned places typically attracted teenagers, urban explorers, and transients who left their marks. Here, beyond the environmental decay, everything remained untouched, as if visitors avoided the place entirely. At the end of the main street stood a large building with Hendricks Coal and Mining Co. emblazoned across its facade. The mine entrance itself was visible beyond, sealed with concrete and marked with faded warning signs. This would make the perfect closing segment for her video. Inside the company building, Naomi found what she expected: administrative offices, a paymaster's window, safety notices yellowed with age. In what had been the manager's office, she discovered something unexpected: a logbook newer than anything else she'd seen, with entries dating to the book contained names, dates, and times, followed by brief notes: Martin Wells, 7/14/17, 9:37 p.m. Heard voices from Shaft 3. Investigated. Did not return. Rebecca and Thomas Harlan, 10/31/17. Unknown visitor, 4/4/18. Time unknown. Camera equipment found abandoned near shaft 2. Dozens of entries followed the same pattern. Naomi's hands trembled as she realized she was holding a record of missing persons. People who had visited Hendrix and never left. The most recent entry was dated just 2 weeks prior. A noise from outside, the distinct sound of boots on gravel, broke her concentration. Naomi moved to the window and felt her heart stop. Walking down the main street was a line of men in mining gear, covered in coal dust, carrying pickaxes and lanterns. Their movements were synchronized, methodical. Though it was still daylight, their lanterns glowed with an unnatural blue light. Naomi dropped below the windowsill, breathing heavily. When she gathered the courage to peer out again, the street was empty. She decided it was time to leave. Gathering her equipment quickly, she half-jogged toward her car, parked at the town's entrance. Each building she passed seemed different now. Doors that had been closed were ajar. Windows that had been broken now appeared intact. The town was transforming around her. When Naomi reached her car, the key fob wouldn't work. She unlocked the door manually and threw her equipment inside, then tried the ignition. The engine turned over but wouldn't catch. After several attempts, she gave up and tried her phone again. Still no signal. By now, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the town. From somewhere deep within the sealed mine came the rhythmic sound of pickaxes striking rock. Naomi locked herself in her car and kept filming, determined to document whatever happened next. As darkness fell completely, the sounds grew loud. Lights appeared in the previously empty houses. Warm, domestic glows suggesting occupancy. Shadows moved behind curtains. From the direction of the mine came the sound of men singing an old coal mining song in perfect, haunting harmony. At 9:17 p.m., according to her camera's timestamp, Naomi's car started by itself. The radio turned on, broadcasting only static. Through the static, a voice clearly said, "Shift change, new workers required." Naomi's camera captured her response. A scream as her car doors unlocked themselves, and every house door in the town opened simultaneously. Her final footage shows dozens of figures emerging from the homes and moving toward her car, their faces obscured by coal dust except for their eyes, which reflected her headlights like those of nocturnal animals. 3 days later, Naomi's empty car was found parked at a rest stop off Highway 25E. Her camera equipment inside, the final footage intact. Authorities searched the coordinates she had shared with her production assistant, finding nothing but dense forest, no road, no town, no trace of Hendrix or its mines. The logbook now contains a new entry. Naomi Peters, 6/17/19, 5:47 p.m. Documented thoroughly. Joined her YouTube channel remains active. New videos appear monthly, showing abandoned places from impossible angles and perspectives no living person could capture. The viewer count continues to grow, and with each view, another potential visitor learns about the unmarked road to Hendrix. Daniel Wilson's job as a long-haul trucker meant he spent more time on America's highways than at his Phoenix apartment. 18 years of driving had taught him every trick for staying alert during overnight hauls. Caffeine management, strategic power naps, and most importantly, radio stations that kept him engaged. In the deserts of the Southwest, radio signals carried impossibly far at night. Daniel had favorite stations from Albuquerque to Los Angeles that kept him company on the loneliest stretches of highway. He knew exactly where each signal would fade and where to find the next companion for his journey. On this particular night in late September, Daniel was hauling refrigerated goods from Flagstaff to Las Vegas along Route 93. A desolate stretch cutting through the Mojave Desert. He had made this run dozens of times and knew that between Kingman and Las Vegas, radio signals became unpredictable. Sometimes you caught distant stations from California, other times nothing but static. Around 2 a.m., an hour outside Kingman, his usual country music station faded to static. Daniel pressed the scan button, watching the digital display click through frequencies. Finding nothing but white noise, he was about to switch to a podcast when the scanner stopped on 87 FM. a frequency technically outside the standard FM band. A voice emerged from the static. Calm, professional, female. You're listening to KDRM, Desert Midnight Radio. The time is 2:13 a.m. Tonight's temperature is 62 degrees. Clear skies all the way to the horizon. Daniel frowned, unfamiliar with the call sign. Reception was crystal clear, unusual for this area. The woman continued. This broadcast is for night travelers only. If you're hearing us, you're exactly where you need to be. Our next caller is waiting. Go ahead, you're on air. A male voice, trembling slightly. I'm just past mile marker. It's been following my truck for the last 20 minutes. Can you describe what you're seeing? The host asked, her tone remaining professionally detached. Headlights, old-fashioned round ones. They stay exactly the same distance behind me no matter how fast I go. I hit 95 trying to lose them, then slowed to 4. Nothing changes. They just maintain position. Daniel felt a chill despite the warm air blowing from his vents. Mile marker 42 was just ahead of him. He instinctively checked his mirrors. The road behind was empty. The caller continued. I tried pulling over to let them pass, but they stopped too. When I got going again, so did they. The weird thing is, I can't actually see a vehicle. Just the lights. How long have you been driving tonight, sir? The host asked. 14 hours. I know what you're thinking, but I'm not tired. I know what I'm seeing. I believe you, she said simply. Many of our listeners have reported similar experiences on this stretch. Whatever you do, don't stop again. Don't get out of your vehicle. The lights can't harm you as long as you keep moving. Daniel passed mile marker 42, his eyes flicking constantly to his mirrors, still nothing behind him. The host continued. We have another caller waiting. Go ahead, you're on Desert Midnight Radio. A new voice, elderly, female, with a slight accent Daniel couldn't place. I've been driving this road for 53 years. The first time I saw the man at mile marker 97, I was 19. He looks exactly the same now as he did then. Daniel knew mile marker 97 well. It was near a slight curve in the road with a small pull-out area, about 40 minutes ahead at his current speed. He's always dressed the same, the woman continued. Tan jacket, dark hat. He stands with his back to the road facing the desert. If you slow down, even just a little. He turns his head, not his body, just his head. Almost 180 degrees. His eyes are wrong. They reflect like an animal's, but they're too aware. Have you ever stopped for him? The host asked. God, no, the woman replied. My brother did in that. Highway patrol found his car at that pullout 3 days later. The engine was still running, tank empty. They never found him. Daniel's knuckles had turned white on the steering wheel. He had passed through mile marker 97 countless times, often noticing the pullout, but never seeing anyone there. The host thanked the caller and smoothly transitioned. For our newer listeners, remember that Desert Midnight Radio collects experiences from night travelers on Route 93. What you're hearing are verified accounts from drivers who have encountered unexplained phenomena along this highway. Our next caller is describing something near the Coyote Springs turnoff. For the next hour, Daniel listened, transfixed, as caller after caller described encounters along the very road he was traveling. Mysterious hitchhikers who disappeared from the passenger seat when the driver looked away. Phantom construction zones that vanished upon approach. A children's playground visible from the highway. Only on nights with a new moon. The swings moving in perfect synchronization despite the absence of wind or children. Daniel approached mile marker 97, slowing slightly despite himself. The pullout came into view, illuminated briefly in his headlights. It was empty. He exhaled, not realizing he'd been holding his breath. Then his radio crackled with static before the host's voice returned. Caller on line 5, you're witnessing something right now, correct? A new voice. Young, male, frightened. Yes, I just passed mile marker 97, and there's a truck behind me that wasn't there before. A big rig. Looks like it's from the 70s or 80s. Old school Peterbilt with rectangular headlights. Daniel's heart hammered in his chest. He was driving a 2022 Peterbilt with modern LED headlights. "Can you see the driver?" the host asked. "No, the windshield is dark, like it's tinted." "But that's not possible on a commercial vehicle, is it? The truck is gaining on me fast. I'm already doing..." Daniel checked his speedometer. 73 miles per hour. His usual cruising speed. He wasn't gaining on anyone. "Sir, what's your name and location?" the host asked, her professional tone cracking slightly. "Daniel Wilson, about a mile past marker 97, heading northwest toward Vegas." Daniel swerved violently, nearly hitting the guardrail. It was his name, his exact location, but he wasn't calling any radio station. The caller, this other Daniel, continued. "The truck's almost on my bumper now. Its grill is all wrong. It looks like teeth. Oh God, it's pushing me. It's..." The transmission cut to static. After a moment, the host returned, her voice noticeably subdued. "We appear to have lost that caller, while we attempt to re-establish connection. Let's hear from our next caller, who is reporting unusual activity at mile marker..." Daniel's exit was at mile marker 100. He took it going 30 miles over the speed limit, abandoning his route entirely. He found a crowded truck stop and parked under the brightest lights, surrounded by other vehicles, other people. With shaking hands, he tried to find KDRM on the radio again. The frequency now played only static. He searched online for any reference to Desert Midnight Radio or KDRM. Nothing. Daniel called his dispatcher and invented a mechanical problem. Refusing to get back on, he took a lengthy detour for the remainder of his contract and eventually requested permanent reassignment to eastern routes. 3 weeks later, he received a small package at his apartment. A cassette tape with no return address. The handwritten label read only, "KDRM Archives. Daniel Wilson interview. 9. But sometimes, on sleepless nights, he imagines he can hear the calm female voice from his radio, introducing a new caller, warning night travelers about a trucker who fled his route and was never quite the same afterward." The cassette remains in his bedside drawer. He can't bring himself to discard it, just as he can't bring himself to drive desert highways after midnight anymore. Some frequencies are best left untuned. Some roads best traveled only in daylight. Eliza Madigan had made the 5-hour drive between Portland and her parents' home in rural eastern Oregon dozens of times. Usually, she took Interstate 84, the main highway that followed the Columbia River before cutting southeast through the state. But on this Friday evening in late November, an overturned semi-truck near the Dalles had closed the interstate indefinitely. Unwilling to wait, possibly hours, for the road to clear, and eager to reach her parents' house for her father's 70th birthday celebration, Eliza decided to detour onto Route 7, a lesser-known state highway that would add only about 40 minutes to her journey. The sun set early this time of year, and by 5:30 p.m., Eliza was driving through complete darkness, the only illumination coming from her headlights and the occasional reflective roadside marker. Route 7 was nearly empty. She had passed only 3 other vehicles in the last hour, all traveling in the opposite direction. The 2-lane highway wound through increasingly remote terrain, transitioning from farmland to dense forest. Eliza's GPS signal grew inconsistent, occasionally showing her position as being in the middle of nowhere before recalculating. Her phone showed only 1 bar of service, which disappeared entirely as she entered a particularly dense stretch of pine forest. "Just great," she muttered, turning up her playlist to dispel the growing sense of isolation. The weather forecast had mentioned possible snow flurries, and she noticed the temperature gauge on her dashboard steadily dropping, now hovering just above freezing. About 2 hours into the detour, Route 7 joined with an even smaller local road for a 20-mile stretch. The signage was minimal, and Eliza slowed, concerned about missing her turn. As she rounded a curve, her headlights swept across a figure standing at the intersection, a middle-aged man in a heavy flannel jacket, hand raised in the universal hitchhiker's gesture. Normally, Eliza would never consider picking up a hitchhiker, especially on a remote road after dark. But something about the man's appearance, his neatly trimmed beard, wire-rimmed glasses, and the battered leather briefcase at his feet, made him seem unthreatening. More importantly, the temperature had dropped below freezing, and light snow had begun to fall. Leaving someone out in these conditions seemed cruel. Eliza pulled over about 15 feet ahead of him and watched in her rearview mirror as he collected his briefcase and approached. She lowered her passenger window halfway. "Thank you for stopping," he said, his voice cultured and gentle. "I've been waiting quite a while. My car broke down about 5 miles back, and there's no cell service out here." "Where are you headed?" Eliza asked. "Pine Haven. It's a small town about 30 miles east. I'm a professor at Eastern Oregon University on my way home for the weekend." "Edward Chambers," he added, extending his hand through the window opening. After a moment's hesitation, Eliza shook it. His hand was ice cold, but his grip firm and brief. "Eliza Madigan, I'm not familiar with Pine Haven, but I'm heading to Redmond, so I can take you at least part of the way." "Perfect. That would be tremendously helpful." Eliza unlocked the door, and Professor Chambers settled into the passenger seat, placing his briefcase carefully on the floor between his feet. As they pulled back onto the highway, Eliza noticed he didn't buckle his seatbelt but decided not to mention it. "What do you teach?" she asked, trying to dispel the awkward silence that had fallen between them. "Local history, primarily focused on early settler communities in Oregon." He gazed out at the snowy landscape passing by. "This region has such a fascinating past. Isolated communities developing their own customs, their own ways of dealing with hardship. Winter was particularly challenging for early settlers. Some resorted to extraordinary measures to survive." Something in his tone made Eliza glance at him. His profile was sharp against the darkness outside, his expression unreadable. She turned her attention back to the road, where the snowfall had intensified. "Are you from Portland originally?" he asked. "Yes, born and raised. My parents moved to Redmond when they retired." Eliza adjusted her grip on the steering wheel, suddenly aware of how alone they were on this stretch of highway. "How about you? Have you always lived in Eastern Oregon?" Professor Chambers smiled slightly. "I've been in Pine Haven for a very long time. Generations of my family have lived there. Actually, the town was founded in 1847 by settlers who became disconnected from their wagon train." "I don't think I've ever heard of it," Eliza said. "Few have. It's not on most maps. The community tends to keep to itself." He turned toward her fully now. "We've developed our own ways over the years." Eliza focused on driving, the snow now falling heavily enough to require her wipers at medium speed. The professor remained silent for several minutes, the only sound the steady rhythm of the wipers and the soft drone of the heater. "Have you ever experienced true hunger, Eliza?" he asked, suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. She glanced at him sharply. "Excuse me, real hunger, the kind that consumes your thoughts, the kind that changes how you view the world and other people." Eliza's discomfort crystallized into something closer to fear. She'd made a mistake picking up this stranger, professor or... "I can't say that I have," she answered neutrally, mentally calculating how much farther they would travel together. "Look, I need to focus on the road with this weather. The snow's getting worse." "Indeed it is," he agreed, his tone once again conversational and professorial. "Did you know that in the winter of 1849-50, the residents of Pine Haven were entirely cut off by snow for nearly 4 months? All 23 original families. Their food supplies ran out by January. They survived, though. Eliza didn't respond, her attention divided between the increasingly treacherous road conditions and her unease about her passenger. "Do you believe people are fundamentally changed by extreme circumstances, or do such conditions merely reveal what was always there, waiting beneath the surface?" Before Eliza could formulate a response, Her headlights illuminated a road sign partially covered in snow. Pine Haven, 3 miles. She frowned. According to her mental map, they should be nowhere near the professor's destination. They had only traveled about 15 miles since picking him up, and he had said Pine Haven was 30 miles away. That can't be right, she said aloud. Oh, but it is, Professor Chambers replied. Pine Haven has a way of appearing when it needs to. As they crested a small hill, Eliza saw lights ahead, warm yellow glows partially obscured by the falling snow, suggesting buildings and street lamp. You can drop me at the town limits, the professor said. Just stop at the welcoming sign. Eliza had no intention of stopping anywhere that might delay her journey. But as they approached the town, her car began to sputter and lose power. The engine caught, then died completely. Their momentum carried them to a gentle stop directly beside a weathered wooden sign reading, "Welcome to Pine Haven. Founded 1847. Eliza tried the ignition repeatedly without success. Her fear, temporarily forgotten in the face of this mechanical problem, returned with full force as she realized her predicament. Stranded in a snowstorm outside an unfamiliar town with a stranger who was becoming increasingly unsettling. That's unfortunate, Professor Chambers observed mildly, but perhaps fortunate as well. You shouldn't be driving in this weather anyway. It's not safe. He gathered his briefcase and opened his door. You should come into town. We have a small inn. You can stay until morning when someone can look at your car. I'll just call for help, Eliza said, pulling out her phone. As expected, there was no signal. No reception here, the professor confirmed. Never has been. Come, the temperature will drop significantly overnight. It's not safe to remain in your vehicle. Eliza hesitated, weighing her option. Stay in a rapidly cooling car on a deserted highway in a snowstorm, or follow this strange man into an unknown town. Neither choice seemed appealing. The community will welcome you, he added, standing in the falling snow now, appearing oddly at home in the harsh conditions. We always welcome travelers in need, especially in winter. Something about the way he emphasized those last words sent a chill through Eliza that had nothing to do with the temperature. Still, she saw no real alternative. She grabbed her purse and phone, locked her car, and followed Professor Chambers toward the lights of Pine Haven. The town appeared frozen in time. Wood-framed buildings from the late 1800s lined a main street illuminated by old-fashioned gaslight-style street lamps. Despite the weather and the early evening hour, the streets were empty. No vehicles were visible anywhere. Professor Chambers led her to a 2-story building with a sign identifying it as the Wayfarer's Rest. As they approached, Eliza noticed curtains twitching in various windows along the street, people watching their progress, but none coming outside. The inn's interior was warm and immaculately maintained in a style consistent with its exterior. Antique furniture, oil lamps alongside modern electric lighting, a massive stone fireplace dominating the small lobby. Behind a wooden counter stood an elderly woman, whose facial features bore a striking resemblance to the professor's. Mother, he greeted her. This is Eliza Madigan. Her car has broken down just outside town. She'll need accommodations for the night. The woman's pale blue eyes examined Eliza with unsettling intensity. Of course, we have a room prepared. We've been expecting a guest. Eliza felt a surge of alarm at those words. How could they have been expecting her when her decision to take Route 7 had been completely spontaneous? I'm sorry, but I really need to get to Redmond tonight, Eliza said. Is there a mechanic in town who might look at my car now? Or someone with a phone I could use? Mother and son exchanged a brief glance before the woman replied. I'm afraid our mechanic won't be available until morning, and there are no working phones in Pine Haven. Never have been. Cell phones, Eliza pressed. Surely someone. We maintain certain traditions here. The professor interrupted smoothly. Technology is kept to a minimum. It's part of what makes Pine Haven special. The woman came around the counter with a large, old-fashioned key. Room 7 is ready. Edward, please show our guest upstairs while I prepare some dinner. You must be hungry after your journey, she added, addressing Eliza directly. At the mention of food, Eliza suddenly recalled the professor's strange questions about hunger. Thank you, but I'm not hungry. I'll just go to my room. Nonsense, the woman insisted. In Pine Haven, we always share a meal with travelers. It's tradition, and tonight is special. The anniversary feast. Anniversary of what? Eliza asked, unable to keep the tension from her voice. Survival, Professor Chambers answered simply. Come, I'll show you to your room. You can refresh yourself before dinner. Feeling increasingly trapped, Eliza followed him up a creaking staircase to the second floor. Room 7 was at the end of a long hallway, its door slightly older looking than the others. Inside was a small but comfortable looking bedroom with a 4-poster bed, antique dresser, and a window overlooking the main street. Dinner will be in 1 hour, the professor informed her. The bathroom is shared, 3 doors down. I'll leave you to settle in. He paused at the doorway. Don't worry about your car. Everything will be taken care of. After he left, Eliza immediately tried the window, finding it painted shut. The view outside showed the snowfall intensifying, now approaching blizzard condition. From this vantage point, she could see more of the town, perhaps 20 buildings in total, arranged around a central square currently obscured by snow. No vehicles were visible anywhere, not even parked ones. She tried her phone again, still no signal. The room had no television, no telephone, not even an electrical outlet that she could find. The only illumination came from an oil lamp on the bedside table, and a ceiling fixture that appeared to run on gas rather than electricity. Eliza sat on the edge of the bed, trying to calm her rising panic. She was stranded in what was to be a town stuck in the 19th century, with people who gave her a profound sense of unease. Her parents would be worried when she didn't arrive, but they might assume she had decided to wait out the highway closure in the Dell. After nearly 40 minutes of considering and discarding various escape plans, Eliza heard movement in the hallway, footsteps and low conversation. Looking out her door's peephole, she saw several people she hadn't met being led to rooms further down the corridor, all appearing disoriented and concerned, all apparently stranded travelers like herself. A bell rang somewhere downstairs, presumably announcing dinner. Eliza considered ignoring it, but hunger and the desire to assess her situation more thoroughly prompted her to leave her room. In the hallway, she encountered a young couple who introduced themselves as Megan and Kyle, travelers from Washington who had experienced car trouble remarkably similar to her own. Engine just died completely, Kyle explained as they descended the stairs together. Never happened before. The car's only 2 years old. In the dining room, Eliza found a long table set for approximately 20 people, with elaborate place settings featuring antique silverware and crystal glasses. Several other travelers were already seated, all looking as uncomfortable as she felt. Professor Chambers sat at one end of the table, his mother at the other. The remaining seats were filling with residents of Pine Haven, all well-dressed in clothing that somehow seemed not quite contemporary, all bearing a subtle family resemblance to one another. Please, join us, the professor's mother called out, gesturing to empty chairs. The anniversary feast is our most important tradition. Eliza sat beside Megan and Kyle, whispering, "Do either of you have cell service?" Both shook their head. "Nothing since before we reached town limits," Megan murmured. The dining room contained no modern appliances, no electric lights, no fans, nothing suggesting technology beyond the late 1800s, except for the residents' clothing, which appeared to be a hybrid of vintage and modern style. Oil lamps cast a warm glow throughout the room, creating more shadows than illumination. Several elderly townspeople entered carrying large covered serving dishes, which they placed at intervals along the table. The professor stood, raising a glass of dark red liquid. For 76 years, Pine Haven has endured through isolation and hardship, he announced. When winter closes in and resources grow scarce, we remember the sacrifice of our founders and their covenant with this land. We welcome tonight's travelers as our guests of honor. Something about his emphasis on guests of honor caused Eliza's skin to prickle with gooseflesh. The other residents raised their glasses in unison, repeating in perfect synchronization. We honor the covenant. The covers were removed from the serving dishes, revealing roasted meats, root vegetables, and fresh bread that seemed impossible to procure in such an isolated location during a snowstorm. The residents began passing dishes with formal, practiced movements while maintaining unsettling eye contact with the travelers. "You must try the roast," urged the elderly woman seated across from Eliza. "It's our specialty, locally sourced, always fresh. We prepare it only once a year, on this night." Eliza noticed that while abundant food was being offered to the travelers, the residents themselves took only token portions, instead watching intently as their guests. When Eliza hesitated to take more than a small serving of vegetables, Professor Chambers frowned. "You must build your strength," he insisted. "The storm will keep you here longer than you think." Halfway through the meal, Eliza excused herself to use the restroom. Instead of going to the shared bathroom upstairs, she slipped out the inn's front door. The snowfall had intensified into a full blizzard, the wind cutting through her lightweight jacket. She trudged toward where she had left her car, the snow already accumulating above her ankle. When she reached the town limits where her vehicle should have been parked beside the welcome sign, she found nothing but an unbroken expanse of snow. Her car had vanished completely. Looking for something, Eliza spun around to find Professor Chambers standing a few feet behind her, seemingly unbothered by the frigid temperature, despite wearing only his indoor clothing. "My car," she stammered through chattering teeth. "It was right here. There's no sign of any vehicle," he observed calmly. "Perhaps you're disoriented by the storm. Easy to lose your bearings in weather like this." "I'm not disoriented," Eliza insisted, though the whiteout conditions were indeed making it difficult to be certain of anything. "Someone moved my car." "No one from Pine Haven would do such a thing," he replied, "but it's dangerous out here. Come back inside before you freeze." With no other option apparent, Eliza followed him back to the inn, noting with growing unease that his footprints in the snow behind them were filling in unnaturally quickly, as if the landscape itself were erasing their passage. Back at the dining table, she noticed several travelers were missing, including Megan and Kyle. When she asked about them, the professor's mother smiled thinly. "They felt unwell and retired early. Too much rich food, perhaps." Her pale eyes never left Eliza's face. "You've hardly eaten. That won't do at all." The remaining meal passed in a blur of forced politeness and mounting dread. Afterward, Eliza returned to her room and blocked the door with the room's heavy dresser. Sleep came fitfully, punctuated by strange noises, rhythmic chanting from somewhere in the building, footsteps in the hallway that paused outside her door before moving on, and most disturbingly, what sounded like scraping and digging beneath her window. She woke at dawn to absolute silence. The storm had passed, leaving behind a pristine blanket of white covering everything visible from her window. More troublingly, there were no footprints anywhere. The street appeared untouched, as if no one had entered or left any building overnight. Eliza moved the dresser and opened her door cautiously. The hallway was empty, the other guest rooms standing open, clearly unoccupied. Downstairs, she found the dining room meticulously clean, with no evidence of the previous night's elaborate dinner. The lobby was similarly deserted. A sound drew her attention to the front window. A snowplow clearing the main road beyond the town. Ordinary, modern civilization, continuing just beyond Pine Haven's border. Eliza grabbed her purse and ran outside without hesitation, not stopping until she reached the highway where the plow had passed. She flagged down the first vehicle she saw, a pickup truck driven by an elderly man who regarded her with concern. "You all right, Miss? Dangerous to be out walking after a storm like that. I need to get to Redmond," she said, climbing into his truck without waiting for an invitation. "My car broke down." "Where'd you break down?" he asked, looking puzzled. "This stretch has been clear since I came through at dawn. Didn't see any vehicles." Eliza turned to look back at where Pine Haven should have been visible from the highway. In the clear morning light, she saw only unbroken forest and snow-covered fields. No buildings, no streets, no welcome sign. "About 3 miles back," she lied, her voice unsteady. "Someone must have towed it already." The man shrugged and drove her to Redmond, where she arrived 6 hours late for her father's birthday, with a story she chose not to share with her worried parents. 1 year later, to the day, Eliza's car inexplicably died on Interstate 84 near the Dalles during another November snowstorm. When she pulled onto the shoulder and called for roadside assistance, she spotted a figure approaching through her rearview mirror, a middle-aged man with wire-rimmed glasses and a battered leather briefcase, thumb extended in the universal hitchhiker's gesture. She drove on 3 flat tires for 12 miles until she reached a gas station with other people around. She never drives in eastern Oregon during winter months anymore. Every November, she receives a formal invitation in the mail to attend the anniversary feast in Pine Haven. The invitations bear no return address and no postmark. She burns them unopened. Local records show that a settlement called Pine Haven did exist briefly in the 1840s, but was abandoned after its first winter when all 23 founding families disappeared without explanation. The official historical record notes only: site abandoned due to unsuitable conditions and insufficient resources. Unofficial local legends suggest a different story, one of hunger, desperation, and a covenant made with something ancient in those woods. Something that still manifests the town for one night each year to collect what it's owed. Detective Marcus Reed had been with the Oregon State Police for 17 years, the last 8 specializing in missing persons cases. He had a reputation for finding people when other investigators had given up, a combination of methodical police work and what his colleagues jokingly called his spooky radar for knowing which abandoned leads to revisit. In July 2021, Reed was assigned to Teisty the disappearance of Emily Swanson, a 32-year-old software engineer who had vanished while driving from Seattle to Bend, Oregon 3 days earlier. Her last known location was a gas station in Lapine, just 30 miles north of her destination. Her credit cards hadn't been used since. Her phone went straight to voicemail, and her gray Honda Civic was missing. Standard procedure in these cases involved checking hospitals, hotels, and traffic cameras while interviewing family and friends. Reed did all this, constructing a detailed timeline of Emily's last known movements. Nothing suggested why she would disappear so close to her destination. Emily's sister, Rebecca, provided what seemed like a crucial detail. Emily had mentioned taking the scenic route for part of her drive, wanting to photograph Cascade Mountain landscapes for her hobby blog. This could explain why she wasn't captured on the main highway cameras, but opened up hundreds of miles of secondary roads as possible routes. After a week with no significant leads, Reed decided to drive Emily's most likely alternate routes himself. Years of experience had taught him that physically traversing a missing person's path sometimes revealed details that reports and maps couldn't capture. He began with Highway 31, a lonely 2-lane road passing through sparse forests and high desert terrain. The summer day was oppressively hot, heat rippling off the asphalt as Reed's unmarked police cruiser climbed into the foothills of the eastern Cascade. About 4 hours into his drive, Reed spotted something that didn't appear on any official map: a narrow dirt road branching westward, marked only by a weathered wooden sign reading Clearwater Creek 7. The name rang a bell. He recalled Emily's sister mentioning that Emily had specifically wanted to photograph unusual rock formations near a place called Clearwater. Reed turned onto the dirt road, which quickly deteriorated into little more than a rough trail. His sedan wasn't built for this terrain, but he continued slowly, suspecting this might be the detour that led to Emily's disappearance. The dense forest on either side created a claustrophobic tunnel effect, branches occasionally scraping against his vehicle. After about 5 miles of increasingly difficult driving, Reed encountered a fork in the road with no signage. He chose the left branch based on a hunch, noticing what appeared to be recent tire tracks in the dusty soil. The road eventually opened onto a small clearing beside a shallow creek. Reed parked and stepped out, immediately struck by the unnatural silence. No birds, no insects, just the faint gurgle of the sluggish water and the occasional creak of trees in the light breeze. Across the creek stood the rock formations, eerily human-like pillars of basalt weathered into shapes, resembling hooded figures. Reed could understand why Emily would want to photograph them, though something about their arrangement made him uneasy. A glint of metal caught his eye, something reflecting sunlight near the water's edge. Drawing closer, Reed discovered a woman's watch half buried in the mud. He recognized it immediately from the description in his case file. A vintage Timex with a distinctive blue face, belonging to Emily Swanson. Reed called for backup and began documenting the scene. While photographing the area where he found the watch, he noticed unusual markings in the softer ground near the creek. Not quite footprints, more like something heavy had been dragged toward the water. His radio produced only static when he tried to contact dispatch, and his cell phone showed no service. This wasn't entirely surprising in such a remote location. Reed decided to continue his investigation until backup arrived, carefully following the drag marks to the creek's edge where they disappeared. The summer sun was beginning its descent when Reed heard a vehicle approaching. Relieved that backup had found the obscure location, he headed back toward the clearing. Instead of a police vehicle, he found a gray Honda Civic parked next to his sedan, Emily Swanson's missing car.
It was empty, seemingly in perfect condition, with no signs of struggle or damage. The keys were in the ignition, and Emily's purse sat untouched on the passenger seat containing her wallet, phone, and identification. Everything appeared exactly as if she had simply stepped out of the car momentarily. As Reed examined the vehicle, the oppressive silence of the clearing was broken by the sound of footsteps approaching from the direction of the rock formation. He turned, expecting to see fellow officers, but instead saw a woman matching Emily Swanson's description walking calmly toward him. "Emily?" he called out, relief mixing with confusion. The woman stopped about 20 feet away. She looked exactly like the photographs in Reed's case file. Shoulder-length brown hair, slender build, wearing hiking clothes, similar to what she had been reported missing in. But something about her posture seemed off, her movements too deliberate, her expression blank. "Are you Detective Reed?" she asked, her voice flat and emotionless. Reed's instincts screamed that something was wrong. "Yes, we've been looking for you, Emily. Your family is worried. I need a ride back to town," she stated, ignoring his implied question about her well-being. "My car won't start anymore." Reed glanced at the Honda, whose engine had been running smoothly when he checked it moments earlier. "I can help with that. But first, can you tell me what happened? Why you've been out of contact for 10 days. The woman tilted her head slightly, as if confused. 10 days? No. I just arrived this morning to photograph the rock formations. She gestured toward the creek without looking at it. I must have lost track of time. Reed had interviewed thousands of people throughout his career. Emily's responses contained the telltale signs of someone constructing a story rather than recalling actual events. Lack of specific details, emotional disconnection, inconsistencies with established facts. "Let me see if I can get your car started," he offered, moving toward the Honda while maintaining awareness of her position. "Then we can follow each other back to the main road." As he reached for the driver's door, Emily spoke again. "Actually, I'd prefer to ride with you. We can come back for my car later." Another red flag. Reed turned to face her directly. "Standard procedure is to secure all personal property. I can't leave your vehicle here." For a brief moment, something changed in Emily's expression, a flicker of something ancient and cold in her eyes. The thing wearing Emily's appearance smiled. A technically perfect human smile, completely devoid of humanity. The others will be joining us soon. The ones who answered your call for backup. The ones currently encountering their own perfect reflections on the road, and a cold realization washed over Reed. Whatever this entity was, it had been imitating his radio calls, luring more officers to this location. He needed to warn them, to escape and block access to this clearing. "What are you?" he asked, buying time while formulating an escape plan. "We are the passengers," the entity replied. "We travel with those who find us. We learn from them, become them, continue their journeys. Emily drove here alone but will leave with companions. As will you." From behind Reed came the sound of car doors closing. Multiple doors, though only 2 vehicles were present. He didn't turn to look, keeping his eyes fixed on the Emily thing. "Your colleagues have arrived, Detective Reed," it said pleasantly. "Why don't you introduce us?" Against his better judgment, Reed glanced over his shoulder. Standing beside both vehicles were 4 figures, exact duplicates of himself, each with the same stance, the same clothing, the same facial expression. Beyond them, the rock formations seemed closer than before, though they couldn't possibly have moved. Reed fired a warning shot into the air, then ran for his vehicle. The Emily entity made no move to stop him, watching with detached curiosity as he reached his car and yanked the door open. In the driver's seat sat another Reed, hands positioned perfectly on the steering wheel, watching him through the window with empty eyes. Reed backed away, turning to flee into the forest, but found himself facing the rock formations, which now completely surrounded the clearing. He had no recollection of running toward them, yet somehow he stood directly before them, close enough to touch their weathered surfaces. Up close, he could see that what appeared to be erosion patterns from a distance were actually crude carvings. Hundreds of human faces frozen in expressions of surprise and terror, some appearing centuries old, others disturbingly modern and detailed. Among them, freshly formed and still taking shape as he watched, was Emily Swanson's face, the stone flowing like liquid as her features emerged from the rock. The last thing Detective Marcus Reed reported seeing was his own face beginning to form in the stone beside her. 3 days later, Oregon State Police located Reed's abandoned vehicle at a rest stop off Highway 30. His service weapon, badge, and personal effects were found inside, along with a handwritten resignation letter, citing personal reasons and his intention to start a new life elsewhere. That same day, Emily Swanson's Honda Civic was discovered in the parking lot of her apartment complex in Bend. Security footage showed her returning from her trip, appearing tired but otherwise normal. She reported to work the following Monday, displaying no unusual behavior according to colleagues. 2 weeks after Reed's disappearance, 5 separate motorists reported picking up a hitchhiker matching his description along different sections of Highway 30. Each described dropping him at various destinations upon his request. Each mentioned his unusual silence during the journey, broken only by his parting words as he exited their vehicles. "I'm not traveling alone anymore." Oregon Department of Transportation has no record of any road called Clearwater Creek in their databases. Geological surveys show no creek or distinctive rock formations in the area where Reed's GPS last pinged before his disappearance. Emily Swanson still lives in Bend, still works as a software engineer. Friends note only one significant change in her behavior since her supposedly uneventful road trip. She now offers rides to strangers far more often than seems prudent, particularly on remote roads after sunset. Andrea Chen had been driving for nearly 14 hours, her 2012 Toyota Camry loaded with everything she owned. making the cross-country move from Chicago to Portland for a fresh start and a new job. She should have stopped hours ago to rest, but the promise of reaching Idaho Falls before midnight had kept her pushing forward, chasing daylight until it abandoned her somewhere in eastern Idaho. Now it was 1:30 a.m., and fatigue clouded her judgment. The main highway had been closed due to an overturned tanker truck, forcing her onto State Road 32, a narrow two-lane road that curved through forests and farmland, poorly lit and marked only by occasional reflective posts. Her GPS had lost signal 20 minutes ago, the screen frozen on the last known position. Andrea's phone showed no service bars. The radio picked up only static, and the few stations that occasionally broke through played religious programming or country music that faded within minutes. Andrea rolled down her window, hoping the cold air would help her stay alert. Her headlights illuminated only a short stretch of road ahead before darkness swallowed everything. She hadn't passed another vehicle in over an hour, and the isolation was becoming unnerving. A green mile marker flashed by. 11:17. Andrea made a mental note, irrationally comforted by this evidence that she was still on a mapped official route. She would watch for the next one. Mile markers typically appeared every mile, giving her a way to track her progress even without GPS. 5 minutes passed, then 10. No mile marker 118 appeared. That's odd, Andrea muttered to herself, glancing at her odometer. She had definitely traveled more than a mile since the last marker. When a marker finally appeared in her headlights, it read 117 again. Andrea frowned, slowing slightly. Had she misread the previous sign? No. She was certain it had been 117. Perhaps this area used a different numbering system, or maybe she had somehow turned onto a different road without noticing. She continued driving, more alert now, watching carefully for the next marker. When it appeared, it again read, What the hell? Andrea said aloud, her voice sounding unnaturally loud in the car's quiet interior. She checked her odometer again. She had now driven nearly 7 miles since first seeing the 117 marker. Unease coiled in her stomach. Something was wrong, but there was nowhere to stop, no intersections or turnouts. Just the endless dark road cutting through dense forest that pressed close on both sides. The 4th mile marker 117 coincided with the appearance of a figure on the roadside, a person standing motionless at the exact spot where the green sign reflected her headlights. Andrea caught only a glimpse as she passed, tall, thin, wearing what appeared to be an old-fashioned park ranger uniform. Andrea's heart rate accelerated. She hadn't seen any indication of a national or state park. And what would a ranger be doing standing on an empty road at nearly the 5th mile marker 117 appeared accompanied by the same figure, standing in exactly the same position, this time clearly illuminated in her headlights. The face beneath the ranger hat was gaunt, eyes deeply sunken, skin gray and withered. As she passed, the figure's head rotated to follow her car, moving with unnatural smoothness, the body remaining perfectly still. Andrea's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She was exhausted, she told herself. The mind played tricks when deprived of sleep. She should stop, but there was still nowhere to pull over safely. The shoulder too narrow, the forest too close. At the 6th mile marker 117, the figure stood directly in the road. Andrea swerved instinctively, narrowly avoiding a collision. Her car fishtailed on the asphalt, and she fought to regain control, heart pounding. When she checked her rear-view mirror, the road behind her was empty. She accelerated, pushing the Camry faster than was safe on the winding road. Something was deeply wrong. Either she was hallucinating from exhaustion, a dangerous condition in itself, or something impossible was happening. The 7th mile marker, 117, appeared, and with it, the figure again, this time standing on the yellow center line, facing her approaching vehicle. Andrea refused to swerve, gripping the wheel with white knuckles, prepared to drive straight through what must be a hallucination. At the last second, the figure stepped casually to the roadside. As Andrea passed, she distinctly heard a voice from outside the car say, Almost time. Her blood ran cold. That was no hallucination. The voice had been clear, masculine, with an odd cadence that reminded her of old recordings from the 1930s. Andrea's logical mind fought to make sense of the situation. She had driven for too long. She needed rest. There must be a reasonable explanation for the repeating mile markers. Perhaps this stretch of road was under construction, and temporary markers had been placed incorrectly. As for the figure and the voice, exhaustion could produce vivid auditory and visual hallucination. She forced herself to breathe deeply, focusing on the practical need to find somewhere safe to stop. The 8th mile marker, 100. The figure now stood beside a vehicle on the roadside, an ancient, boxy Ranger service truck from another era. Green with faded gold lettering, reading Idaho Forestry Service. Its headlights were on, illuminating the road ahead. For a moment, Andrea considered stopping to ask for help, but instinct warned against it. Instead, she accelerated past, glimpsing the Ranger raising his hand in an almost ceremonial gesture. In her rearview mirror, she watched as the Ranger truck pulled onto the road behind her, its yellowish headlights visible in the darkness. The distance between them remained constant, no matter how Andrea varied her speed. The 9th mile marker, 117, coincided with a change in the landscape. The dense forest abruptly gave way to open fields, bathed in ghostly moonlight. In the distance, Andrea could see structures, what appeared to be a small town or settlement. Relief washed over her at this sign of civilization, even as she wondered why her maps hadn't shown any towns along this route. The Ranger truck remained behind her, maintaining the exact same distance. As she approached the settlement, Andrea noticed something unsettling. There were no lights, no street lamps, no illuminated windows, not even the glow of television screens behind curtains. The buildings became more distinct as she drew closer. Old-fashioned structures from the early 20th century, a main street with small storefronts, a church steeple rising above the other rooftops. The 10th mile marker, 117, stood at what appeared to be the town limits. Beyond it was a sign reading, "Welcome to Perseverance, founded 1917, population 117. Andrea slowed, searching for any sign of life or activity. The main street was empty, the buildings dark and silent, yet something about the town seemed not abandoned, but waiting. As if the entire community were holding its breath. She considered driving straight through without stopping, but the dashboard light she'd been ignoring for the past 20 minutes now commanded her attention. The gas gauge hovered just above empty. She had maybe 10 miles left, not enough to reach anywhere else in this remote area. A single light glowed ahead, a vintage neon open sign in the window of what appeared to be a small gas station at the far end of the main street. Andrea directed her car toward it, watching in her mirror as the Ranger truck turned onto a side street and disappeared. The gas station looked like something from an old photograph. 2 antique pumps beneath a small overhang, a tiny building that likely served as both office and convenience store. The neon sign provided the only illumination, casting alternating red and blue light across the empty forecourt. Andrea pulled alongside a pump and turned off her engine. The silence was immediate and complete. No distant traffic sounds, no insects, not even the wind. Just absolute stillness. She sat for a moment, gathering courage, then opened her door and stepped out. The air felt wrong. Neither warm nor cold, with no movement or scent. It reminded her of the artificial atmosphere in a museum diorama. The pump was a manual type she had never encountered before, with a rotating analog display and a heavy metal nozzle. No credit card reader, no digital screen. Andrea tried the handle, but nothing happened. No sound of fuel flowing. She turned toward the office, where the silhouette of a person was visible through the window, seated behind a counter. As she approached, she could make out more details. A man in what appeared to be a gas station attendant's uniform from decades past, complete with a bow tie and peaked cap. Andrea pushed open the door, triggering a mechanical bell that sounded unnaturally loud in the silence. The attendant looked up but didn't speak. His face had the same gaunt quality as the Ranger's, with deep-set eyes that reflected the neon light like polished stone. "Excuse me," Andrea said, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. "I need gas, but the pump doesn't seem to be working." The attendant smiled, revealing teeth too perfectly aligned, too white. "You're the last one," he said, his voice matching the one she'd heard on the road. "Number 117, right on schedule." Andrea felt a chill despite the neutral temperature. "I don't understand. I just need some gas to get to Idaho Falls." "You've already arrived at your destination," the attendant replied calmly. "Everyone does, eventually. Some just take longer to accept it." Through the window, Andrea noticed movement. Lights coming on in buildings throughout the town. Figures emerging onto the previously empty streets. They all moved with the same unnatural smoothness as the Ranger, all wearing clothing from different decades of the past century. "What is this place?" Andrea asked, backing toward the door. "Perseverance," the attendant replied simply. "Founded in 1917 when the first traveler never left. Population now 117, with your arrival." He gestured toward the window. "They're all coming to welcome you. They've been waiting a long time for our community to be complete." Andrea ran for her car, fumbling with her keys. As she reached for the door handle, she found herself surrounded by silent figures, men, women, and children of various ages, all with the same gaunt faces and two perfect smiles. They formed a circle around her, not threatening, simply observing. From among them stepped the Ranger she had seen on the road. "Mile marker 117 has been waiting for you, Andrea Chen," he said, "just as it waited for each of us. The road brings only those who are meant to stay." "I'm not staying anywhere," Andrea insisted, yanking her car door open. "I'm getting back on the highway and driving to Portland." The crowd parted silently, allowing her access to her vehicle. None tried to stop her as she started the engine and accelerated away from the gas station, back toward the road that had brought her here. As she passed the town limits, she saw the "Welcome to Perseverance" sign again, but now it read, "Population." Andrea drove frantically, pushing her car to its limits on the winding road, watching her gas gauge drop lower with each passing minute. The forest closed in once more, mile marker 117, appearing with clockwork regularity no matter how far she drove. When her car finally sputtered to a stop, out of fuel, Andrea was unsurprised to find herself back at the edge of Perseverance, the gas station's neon open sign still the only light visible. The Ranger stood beside her car, patiently waiting. "The road always brings us back," he explained gently. "That's why we call it Perseverance. Once the road chooses you, there's no other destination." 2 weeks later, a state trooper investigated an abandoned Toyota Camry on the closed section of Interstate 15, where the tanker truck had overturned. The vehicle contained luggage and personal belongings belonging to Andrea Chen, who had been reported missing after failing to arrive in Portland for her new job. The car's gas tank was full. On the passenger seat lay a hand-drawn map showing an alternate route via State Route 32, with a small town called Perseverance marked at mile marker 1. According to Idaho Department of Transportation records, no such town exists. State Route 32 remains lightly traveled. Motorists occasionally report seeing a woman in a gas station attendant's uniform, standing beside mile marker 117, arm extended, thumb raised in the universal hitchhiker's gesture. Local authorities have searched the area repeatedly and found nothing unusual. The mile markers on State Route 32 proceed in normal numerical sequence from 116.